Hello, St. John Baptist Church. Al McClaney here with a weekly stewardship video. We continue on our theme of growing God's kingdom, and the scripture verse of emphasis is Proverbs 14:4 in the Amplified, where there are no oxen, the manager is clean, but much revenue because of good crops comes by the strength of the ox. And as always, no financial advice uh, or no advice should be seen as coming from a licensed financial advisor. This is for educational purposes only, because in this video, you definitely will hear me mention some different vendors and stocks. None of those are to be seen as financial recommendations. So when we talk about this scripture, where there are no oxen, the manger is clean. What we're talking about is revenue generation. And so the manger, or the ox rather, another word for it would be assets and actions that produce revenue and profits. And when I say revenue and profits, that means you should be making money off of these ventures. So some examples are stocks and bonds, but also, of course, mutual funds within your 401k, or outside if you have an individual brokerage account, say with a group name like Charles Schwab or TD Ameritrade or Robinhood. You hear a lot of people trading now. Traded collectibles, and those could be, I think I've told you before in a video where there was a young man who traded Nike shoes, and he traded for profit. Property, like rental property, or you have land, raw land that you're going to sell or develop yourself. And then there are businesses. And let me go back to those stocks and bonds, and then I'm going to go more into individual businesses. For stocks and bonds, there are ways now that you can contribute in small ways. And you may have heard Charles Schwab's commercial about stock slices. Well, those are fractional shares, which are smaller than normal shares, or mini shares, if you will. And that gives you an opportunity to participate in companies that have large stock prices, such as Google or Amazon, which the last time I think Amazon was trading a little over $3,000 per share. Apple was trading higher, but they did it what they call a stock split, where they brought the price down, and it may enable investors before who thought the price was too high could now invest. So there's many different ways. What the important thing is, you pick a way that's comfortable for you, whether it's through Robinhood or through TD Ameritrade, Charles Schwab, E-Trade, whatever, Interactive. There are brokers out there. Find the one that makes you comfortable. The other thing is, when you're looking at finding that oxen that's going to produce revenue, it doesn't have to be one or the other. You can do a combination of all. You can have like your own business and still participate in the market, or do collectibles, or still have rental properties. I have several friends that have all of these, which diversifies you. And so when it comes to business, I wanted to emphasize on this, is that you may say, well, how do I get in business? Well, oftentimes it could be a hobby that you're really good at, and it becomes a business. And the example of that I will use is my wife, Janine, because I know this story personally. Janine became interested in a hobby of baking cookies, and became custom cookies. And so much so that now it's been over probably 3-4 years that she's moved away from corporate America and runs the business full time in the form of J9 Dainty Delights. And I've got some screenshots of her website here, and her email address, or her web address, where you can go out and look at some of her work. But this all started off as a hobby. So she did it a little while she worked a corporate job, and then she walked away and did this now full time. And it was because of God's principles that we were able to afford this opportunity, meaning we were following principles of savings, getting out of debt, making sure that we had money to launch the business. And so now, proud of her, and the fact the business has never been in the red. It's always been a profit, so we can take the money, and we don't live off of that business, to go back into the business, as well as the profit goes into savings and investing. So you can see the website here. You can see some examples of her work. And again, this started off as a hobby. So I would say anyone, you can do this. If God has placed this on your heart to do, He'll give you the ability to do it. So let's take a look at last week's uh, or the week before earnings play, because I told you the week of July 27th was going to be a huge amount of earnings that launched into our earnings season. So these companies are reporting earnings for second quarter. Everyone expected it to be bad, but surprisingly, there are quite a few that were pretty good. And so the market did not react violently in a sales mode. So you can see I want to highlight these 2 days here on the week of the 27th. So that Wednesday and Thursday, there were these companies that represent a huge amount of the S&P 500. And let me put this in perspective. So there are 4 companies here that reported in 2 days on this last Wednesday and Thursday: Facebook, Amazon, Apple, Alphabet, which is Google, right? Uh, these companies here represent $5 trillion of worth. So just these 4 companies, Facebook, Amazon, Apple, and Alphabet, which is Google, represent $5 trillion. Let me put this in perspective. That's 1/5 of the Fortune 500 just in these 4 companies. They reported over $200 billion in sales last quarter, in second quarter. So the market responded favorably to that. So what's coming up? We don't have anything near the power of the earnings that were reported last week, but we still have quite a few powerful companies that are reporting. And then so goes earnings, so goes the market. So here's a couple of that are reporting on Monday before the bell. Marathon Oil, probably not going to be as good. You got British Petroleum, Beyond Meat. A lot of you've heard about. It's a startup company from years ago that has really been catching fire as far as the reported earnings. It'd be interesting to watch and see what Wynn does, the hotel firm, because of the pandemic, what effect. Moderna, and I'm going to talk about this later because this is in the pharmaceutical space, and with the rush that everyone's trying to get a vaccine for the coronavirus, it's interesting that this stock has been rather volatile up and down as we get reports of it being close to a vaccine. CVS Pharmacy, Roku, so some still pretty large names, but nothing, of course, compared to the following this previous week. But still, it'll be good to watch and see how those earnings reports go. So I mentioned Moderna. I'm going to get into that a little bit later of a tool that we introduced the week prior. I'm going to go back into it. But as we always do, let's take a look at SPY, S&P 500, and see we've just been, again, channeling along, slightly up, but still kind of in a channel for the S&P 500, which is that exchange traded fund SPY. The one that has clearly been leading us is QQQ, which is technology, which is where you would see Amazon, Apple, Google, Facebook, all of those would have been part of the technology. But even it's still been in a slight channel, if you will, but it's clearly what's leading us up. So I had mentioned before Moderna, and that operates in the pharmaceutical space. So I thought it'd be interesting to look and use it as illustrative purposes for this tool. Pfizer, and this stock symbol is PFE. So Pfizer had also talked about in the last couple of weeks having a vaccine ready and receiving a large amount from the government regarding being able to put that vaccine in mass production out on the market. So it was interesting just to see kind of what its stock was doing. So it's been in an uptrend, and then when that news was announced a couple of weeks ago, you can see it took a large increase in the stock, and you can see how it's also been kind of in a channel the last couple of days. But one of the things we looked at is, okay, here's a probably pretty reasonable price for a stock share, $38.48. But you can see off the low earlier this year was $28. So say you had that stock, you would have made $10 just on one share. But we can look at and play this a different way. So we had introduced last week the website ETFDB, and we did a video, if you can look at it last week, on what an exchange traded fund is. And just in summary, it's like operates like a mutual fund, but it trades throughout the day, where a mutual fund has one price and then for the day, and then it closes at the end of the day with a price. Exchange traded funds all through the day, but it has a mixture and several different stocks within it. So you can go to this website and you can look at that particular stock. And in this case, I put PFE, and I said, what exchange traded funds have PFE, which is Pfizer, in them? So I may be able to go and invest in that particular exchange traded funds, but maybe not be hurt so much if Pfizer has something, go wrong with it, so, but I would still be exposed to a lot of the pharmaceuticals. So I picked this one. So this is telling me that PFE, Pfizer, because I put it in the search bar, has exposure in all of these exchange traded funds, meaning that Pfizer is within these particular exchange traded funds. So I just randomly, I picked this one, First Trust NASDAQ Pharmaceuticals, and it has the symbol FTXH, which allows us, we know the symbol, to look at how it's performed. And you see it's done very well this year. And I would imagine it's because of the pandemic and all of these pharmaceuticals racing to come up with a vaccine or a cure. So here's this exchange traded fund and how it has been performing this year. But we also can go out to that website and look at that exchange traded funds, which companies are in there. And you can see here are the pharmaceutical companies that are in there, including there's the one that we were looking at, which is Pfizer. So this is a great tool you can use. So you can even look in there and say, you know what, I want to maybe look at investing in these other companies out here like Eli Lilly, that's LLY, Abbott Laboratories, they were in the news for like their testing, Bristol Myers. So all of these would give you exposure to, for instance, the pharmaceutical. And this is just a way of taking an idea that you may have seen based on some news story, and how can I bring it to light and act upon it and maybe invest in it. So I want to end with, kind of the why, and always emphasize this. Why is it so important that we have our finances correct? Why is it so important that we invest in some type of way, either through a business or, as we said, collectibles or the market? It's important because we as Christians should be reflecting and modeling the Lord as far as his principles. And because he is the owner, we should be playing our role as being good and faithful stewards. And in this case, here's the reminders in the word that says God owns it all. So Psalms 24:1, the Amplify says, the earth is the Lord's and the fullness of it, the world and those who dwell in it. And just in case that we don't get it twisted, he owns the silver and the gold. Haggai chapter 2, verse 8, the silver is mine and the gold is mine, declares the Lord of hosts. And we've said from last week, the scripture clearly tells us that it's the Lord that gives us the power to get wealth, so that it confirms his covenant. So he owns it all. And that was Deuteronomy 8:18 in last week's video. So I hope this week brings you profit or ideas. And if we're listening to God, he will inspire them, because we know he gives us the power to get wealth. And this glorifies him and points back to him. So once again, have a great week coming up. Hope you had a great previous week. And we will see you next week with a weekly stewardship video. And Brother Al.